bringing like drag queens on TV on the main screen, it really kind of created somehow a revolution because a lot of people could see themselves into those drag queens.
Welcome to the Research for Good podcast. My name's Professor David Ellis, and today I'm joined by Dr Mario Campana, who is an Associate Professor in Marketing. His research studies consumer behaviour with a focus on diversity and inclusion. He's also just edited a book, Drag as a Marketplace. Mario, welcome.
Hello, everyone.
So, Mario, thanks very much for coming. We're in the School of Management at the University of Bath. How did you get here?
Bath has always been on my radar since I was like a PhD student. So I've always been looking at the School of Management since then. And then I think that one of the reasons why I kind of came to Bath was the big social impact of the school, the work of SIBOs, and I was impressed by all the social work actually done, social impact of the school.
Speaking of that kind of social impact, so you're interested in consumer research. What is consumer research and how does that fit within management?
Within consumer research, we do have, there are different strands. So you look at the psychology of consumers and, what is the best color of the product for them to buy and the response to those products. On the other end, it's about also more the cultural, social, and anthropological role of consumers within society. And I've always been interested more in that, so to understand, how consumers deal with brands that are icons, right? That make sense to their lives. I really look at consumption as consumption of everything, right? So everything can be consumption, but at the same time, everything can be business, right? At the same time, because everything is consumption.
And so some of your more recent work has looked at this idea of like drag as a marketplace. How did that come about?
Again, it was quite personal because I was watching a lot of RuPaul's Drag Race, which is like this TV show that has drag queens at the center, kind of where you find the next America's drag superstar. And I was watching a lot. So people around me, my friends, and then other people would constantly be talking about it, right? So that kind of started me asking a bit more, myself, is like how this brand was impacting so much their lives, right? So I saw that people around me, they were starting kind of, using the slang of the drag queens and then, I don't know, kind of they knew all the drag queens as they were rock stars. And then at a certain point, you could see that the show and the business was growing and growing and growing. These drag queens that were kind of were coming out of the show. They were touring the world, and they were making a lot of money. Entire industry basically was created just because of the show. And then there was all this kind of discussion between the traditional forms of drag and, kind of the one that you would find in the local bar that were very niche and very relegated to the local area, compared to this like massive, phenomenon on the other end. So I think that was quite interesting to see, even from a business perspective, because you had like this multi-million business on one side, and then you had the drag queens that would still kind of be in the local bar making a few bucks when they were kind of performing.
So there's, things like RuPaul's Drag Race as this multi-million pound industry. It's probably done a lot to reduce inequality or to show people things that they hadn't seen before and then, monetize that and take it into the stratosphere. But you already sort of touched there upon where it doesn't help. Is there a way, it's not all one direction, is it?
No, it's not. It's complex, and we're seeing more and more the complexities nowadays. So on the one hand, I think, so one of the things that really RuPaul's Drag Race did was to put drag on the radar, especially in terms of representation. Because we kind of had, I think before Drag Race, there were few, like not many representation of drag queens on TV. Bringing like drag queens on TV on the main screen, it really kind of created somehow a revolution, because a lot of people were, well, not only they could, drag queen had like visibility on screen, but a lot of people could see themselves into those drag queens, right? Because they were talking about challenges in being a performer, yes, but also living with stigma of being a drag queen, and people that have been abandoned by their family, or they were kind of living with HIV, or they were kind of outcast for drug abuse, and these, or they were bullied because openly queer. So I think that this type of visibility really spoke to a lot of people, and also to me personally, right? And also, if you were not a drag queen, or if you were not necessarily identifying as queer or LGBTQ+, you could see those type of challenges, kind of with you. So I think that was very positive. And then, of course, on the negative sides, it kind of it also created quite a bit of exclusion. First of all, at the beginning, Drag Race was really focused on kind of the mainstream drag, in the sense that, for example, they would not really see very well transgender people competing on the show as part of the community, and that created quite a bit of a backlash, because the transgender community is one of the biggest community that's been part of drag. But that form of exclusion, that form of discrimination was quite present in the show, especially in the early seasons. So it created exclusion within the drag community as well, and what really meant drag. The good thing, though, is that they've been actually quite responsive to the criticism. So they kind of started changing this idea of what is a drag queen, who is a drag queen, and they kind of changed from a drag queen to drag more in general. They had competitors who were openly transgender, who won the competition. So I think that in that sense they were more open to it, but it created indeed some exclusion. And then there is like the biggest problem that has come out with visibility is the backlash.
Because it then presumably gives people a new target to then go for.
I mean, if you think about legislators trying to prevent drag, right? That's been astonishing. Well, Florida, they had laws against drag queens shows like in open air, and of course because of the kids, they were actually arguing that they were teaching gender, and kind of the scaremongering of around what being a drag queen was actually has been huge.
Do you think there's any way of avoiding that inevitable backlash? Because this has obviously happened when there's suddenly more exposure. There's this many people will be exposed to that and go, all right, I get that. But then there's always this new target, particularly in the online world, where it's not just people shouting at a television, they're shouting into the open. Is it ever avoidable?
The sad truth is no, right? Today, as I was coming in, I was listening to the audiobook of the new Judith Butler's book, Who is Afraid of Gender. They were pointing out how effectively this discrimination is dictated by the power structures, right? The patriarchal power structures. In the moment in which you try to challenge the patriarchal power structure, then, especially when it comes, to challenging gender, then the backlash is inevitable. You have a lot of kind of political beliefs, religious beliefs, or existing power structures that don't want to leave powers to others, right? The traditional idea of masculinity, right, for instance, that's something that is very embedded. It's a very strong power structure. In the moment in which you're kind of saying that, which you're kind of implying that maybe that form of masculinity doesn't have the power anymore, is when the backlash comes, for instance. I've been reading a lot of Goffman's work on stigma. There is one of the stigma that he talks about is the tribal stigma. Is the one that you can do whatever you want. You can try to kind of normalize it as much as possible, but it will never go away. And it's the most difficult to eradicate, the most impossible to eradicate. And that's the thing that here we are in front of that stigma, right? It's like it's impossible to eradicate.
Being optimistic things do change. It's just almost like you have to be prepared for that. There's going to be a fight, there's going to be an argument, and we could give lots of examples of where all the way through from, say, women getting the vote through to decriminalisation of homosexuality. Like, things do change, but not always across the world, unfortunately. But there's a fight to be had. So your work, you approach this from this kind of marketing viewpoint. How do you hope your work will help with these big challenges?
So I think there are different levels. One of the things is that there is more of a personal level of kind of, since we spend a lot of time working on these topics, we must do as well something that kind of we believe in, right? Sometimes I think even if nobody will read this paper or will read this book, at least I did something that I am not ashamed of, in that sense. So it's something in which I believed, or kind of something that I've been thinking about, and maybe by reading these, someone can think about drug in a different way. So this is the first thing. The second way, I hope that actually this type of work helps. I don't know if any organization or charities could try to find maybe a hook that then to change their policies, for instance. So I was talking to a charity. It was about breast cancer. This charity basically is it works with different community to make sure that there is breast cancer awareness. And one of the issues around breast cancer awareness is that LGBTQ plus people are basically not targeted into any of the campaigns, and they have different complexities, right? It's like, usually breast cancer is very focused on, the pink ribbon, and that's what they were talking about. We started a conversation about, some work that I've been doing in this area, and about, how people kind of access this type of services, and, what could be useful for these charities maybe as a sort of insight to use maybe in a campaign that they were developing.
Well, and that can start a snowball effect.
Yeah.
Policy change can come from one place, but historically it has to start somewhere. Once one charity starts, someone else then picks that up.
You can have social impact with marketing, and I think that area is like less known and also less prevalent. But the good thing actually here in Bath, we have a lot of people that work in that area in kind of marketing for good. So it is possible, but we have less of a reputation as marketers that we could do that.
It is interesting because I think most people, when they think of marketing, the stereotype is selling people things and making money. But actually, it's really interesting that if you just dig a bit deeper, marketing isn't just about making money. It actually is quite a powerful force for changing things.
Actually, this charity called Know Your Lemons, and it's actually different from other charities, because they work with communities about, kind of breast cancer awareness, but they do it from a very clever form of marketing. So, for example, they have these adverts in which they have these different lemons with the different signs of breast cancers, for instance, and that actually it's very effective. It's very communicative from a marketing perspective. That's quite effective because you kind of look at it and you understand it, right? So in terms of message, it's quite perspective. So indeed, I do think that you can do really positive things with marketing.
I mean, ultimately, it's the same as any behaviour change. Like the examples here, they're using marketing principles, but ultimately it's about health, it's about well-being. So there's that kind of collision, and I guess in places like schools of management where you have lots of different types of people, you're going to get this kind of natural mixture of, well, they're marketing, but actually you could almost call it behaviour change if you were in another area. Just skipping back a little bit, so if we think back to when you were finishing your PhD, was this what you envisioned you'd be doing at this point?
But I have to say that this kind of approach more to the diversity topics emerged a lot after the PhD. And I think one of the interesting things, I don't know if it's true for everyone, but at least in marketing, I think we study ourselves, right? It's like we're kind of trying to, and so I think maybe in an effort to start to understand more myself, I started effectively going into this direction. But I do think that, I would have not seen me kind of full into, 10 years after the PhD now, fully into the LGBTQ plus research and, drag queens and transgender consumers and queer brands and, kind of all this kind of area of research, So this is an area in which we are continuing our research and trying to understand, where we are going with this. We had these periods in which everything exploded, everybody was happy, everybody was visible, Now where are we going with this? Where will we be like in 5 years' time?
I suppose from your point of view that makes your work even more important because it's now at this point of where, well, actually the fight isn't over for equality.
No, the fight isn't over for equality indeed. And the other positive side though is that luckily we had those steps of legal recognition, right? So while there is always a menace of taking away those rights, it's quite difficult as well, like taking them away, right? In the sense that how can you repeal laws? From that perspective, it's like, it's true that we go, maybe it's like it goes down, it will pick up again, but we have to see how low we go. That's always the worry. It's like, it's true that, it's like cyclical, but the real scare is that, at the moment it's less sport for pride and, kind of, but then what does it mean like on a daily basis for people?
You've been listening to the Research for Good podcast. To find out more about research in the School of Management, you can visit our website or click the links in the episode description.